If you ask most people how much they need to retire, they'll give you $1 million, maybe more. It's what every calculator, every article, every well-meaning friend has been telling you for years. But if you've paid off your house and you've got a pension coming, that number was never built for you. And the difference could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's where those rules actually came from. The 70% replacement rate, the 25 times spending rule, the whole you need $1 million minimum framework. It all traces back to American research from the 1990s. William Bengen, a financial planner in California, looked at historical stock and bond returns and concluded that if you pulled 4% from your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, your money would probably last 30 years. That math assumed you were funding your entire retirement from investments with maybe some Social Security on the side. It assumed a rent check or a mortgage payment every month until you die. And Canadian institutions imported it. The banks, the financial planning software, the online calculators. They never really asked whether it fits someone who owes nothing on their home and has a defined benefit pension coming every month for the rest of their life. And I've watched what this does to people. Someone shows up in their late 50s, burned out but still working, because a retirement calculator told them they're $300,000 short. They don't know the calculator treated them like a renter, that it assumed no pension. They just see the red number and keep grinding. RBC Wealth Management themselves have said the 4% rule should be a starting point, not a prescription. And they said that for the Americans it was originally built for. So the question isn't whether you've hit the number. The question is whether the number ever applied to you in the first place. Let me put this a different way. When you pay off your mortgage, you don't just eliminate a monthly bill. You create something that works like a tax-free pension you can live inside. A paid-off home delivers housing services. Economists call it imputed rent. Nobody taxes you on the value of living in your own house. If renting a comparable place in your neighborhood would cost you $2,500 a month, that's $30,000 a year in housing you're getting without writing a check. The government doesn't treat that as income. It doesn't show up on your tax return, but it's real money you don't have to generate from your RRSP. Now, owning still costs money. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance. On an $800,000 home, those carrying costs might run you $14,000 a year. That's maybe 1.5% to 2% of the home's value in actual cash outflows. Compare that to the renter paying $30,000 for the same roof. That $16,000 gap is income you don't need to pull from your portfolio at all. And here's something nobody mentions when they hand you the retirement calculator. After 65, spending tends to decline by about 1% to 2% per year in real terms. Researchers have tracked this across wealth levels. Even people with plenty of money spend less as they get older. Not because they're running out, but because they travel less. They slow down. Their priorities shift. The spending line those projections draw, flat and climbing with inflation every year, overstates what you actually need once the mortgage is gone. This isn't some theoretical edge case. Housing is the single biggest expense in retirement, typically around 1/3 of total spending. When that line item shrinks from $30,000 a year to $14,000, the entire math of your retirement tilts, and none of the generic rules account for it. But there's a second piece to this equation that tilts the math even further. Now layer in the other thing those rules ignore: the income that's already locked in. CPP, OAS, and employer pensions don't show up in your net worth statement the way an RRSP balance does. So people tend to undercount them. But they're real, they're monthly, and they're mostly protected from the market. Let's put some numbers on them. As of January 2026, the maximum CPP retirement pension at age 65 is just over $1,500 a month. The average new recipient gets around $925. Most people don't contribute at the maximum for a full 39 years, so the average is lower. OAS, which is based on how long you've lived in Canada and not what you earned, adds another $743 a month for the 65 to 74 bracket. That's over $2,200 a month per person before you've touched a pension or a single dollar of savings. For a couple, even with average CPP and full OAS, you're looking at $35,000 to $45,000 a year in government income alone. Add a defined benefit pension, the kind common in the public sector, teaching, nursing, unionized trades. That floor can easily land between $50,000 and $70,000 a year for a two-person household. Now connect this back to the housing piece. If your annual costs are low because the house is paid off, a lot of your spending is covered before you touch your portfolio, maybe most of it. One detail worth knowing? OAS starts getting clawed back if your individual net income passes $90,997 in the 2024 tax year. It disappears entirely around $148,000. That's a problem to plan around, not a reason to panic. But it's one of the reasons the order you draw from which accounts, RRSP versus TFSA versus non-registered, actually matters more than the size of the accounts themselves. So now you've got two things the generic rules never see: a housing cost that's half what they assume, and an income floor they don't count. Let's put those pieces together. Take a couple who wants to spend $60,000 a year in retirement. Comfortable, not lavish. Their house is paid off, so their housing costs are around $14,000 a year in taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance. CPP, OAS, and a modest pension deliver $50,000 a year. Their portfolio only needs to generate $10,000 a year. At a 4% withdrawal rate, you need about $250,000 to sustain that. Not $1.5 million. $250,000, the same couple renting for $2,500 a month would have $30,000 in housing costs instead of $14,000. Without a pension, their guaranteed income floor might be closer to $35,000. Suddenly, they need their portfolio to generate $25,000 a year. That's a $625,000 nest egg, 2.5 times as much, for the exact same lifestyle. Now, I'm not saying the math is this clean in real life. Taxes take a bite. Lumpy expenses show up. Inflation doesn't pause. But the direction is what matters. Needing $250,000 to support the same spending versus $1.5 million isn't a rounding error. It's a completely different retirement. Planners call the 5 years on either side of retirement the fragile decade. That's when sequence of returns risk is at its peak, and decisions around CPP timing RRSP meltdown and withdrawal order have lifetime consequences. When your portfolio doesn't have to carry the full load, its job changes. It's not there to keep the lights on. It's there for flexibility, for protection against shocks, for helping your kids if you want to. That's a better problem to have. Except there's a catch, and it has nothing to do with how much money is in your account. The catch is that you've spent 30 years in accumulation mode. Every instinct you have points toward building the pile, protecting the pile, watching the number go up. Switching to spending can feel like breaking something, even at a rate the math says is perfectly safe. I've watched it happen. The risks that remain are real. If the market drops 30% in your first 2 years of retirement, and you're pulling money out, the damage compounds. Long-term care costs can arrive without warning, and plenty of people treat their home equity as sacred, untouchable. Which is fine if that's your choice, but it means ignoring a major safety net that's already sitting there. Downsizing, or even just having a HELOC set up before you retire as an emergency backstop, gives you options without selling investments into a down market. Here's what I want you to take from this. You may need less than the calculators have been telling you. That's not permission to be careless. It's permission to stop grinding toward a number that was built for someone else's situation. Someone who rents. Someone whose retirement looks nothing like yours. The decisions that actually matter from here aren't about hitting some arbitrary account balance. They're about when you take CPP, how you melt down your RRSP before the mandatory conversion, and which accounts you draw from first to stay out of the OAS clawback zone. That's where the real money lives. And that's what we'll cover next. If this gave you a different way to think about your number, the video on CPP timing and tax-efficient withdrawal order picks up right here.